Welcome to her remarkable history. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The English woman buried alive twice. One of the greatest fears that people have is being buried alive, and it is rather common. Throughout the centuries, it was used as a method of execution by different people. The Romans used it to put people to death, and another form of this punishment is immurement, where victims were walled into a structure or a number of rooms and left to succumb to their fate. But there was a story of a woman in the 17th century who was buried alive shockingly, and Alice Blunden's fate was a rather tragic but brutal one. Her story is a remarkably shocking one which should teach the world not to consume too much poppy water. Alice Blunden is remembered in the history books for being a woman who encountered premature burial, being buried before dead. She was born Alice Davies and was the daughter of John Davies, and she married William Blunden on the 3rd of November 1656. Alice and her husband were a well-known local family, and they were regarded as popular. But they were also considered rather wealthy too, as her husband was a malt dealer. However, Alice Blunden's legacy is not best known for what she did on Earth, more about what happened when she entered the Earth. Southview Cemetery in Basingstoke was the site where, following the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, Alice Blunden encountered a great problem. She was regarded as a woman who was rather large or sizable, and according to one account, she was described as a fat, gross woman who had accustomed herself many times to drink brandy. But one evening, she drank a little too much poppy water, which was considered a very strong drink. One evening, she drank so much poppy water that she lost consciousness and slept into a coma, which was very deep. This sleep she had was so deep that she could not be awoken, even when the doctor was called, and a special apothecary was summoned, and he could not even wake her. With this, it was declared that Alice Blunden had died from consuming too much poppy water. A mirror was even placed below her nose, and it could not pick up any breathing. But at this time, her husband was away on business in London, and because of this, he received the news of her death and stated that Alice's funeral should take place when he returned back to Basingstoke. But at this time in the year, it was considered best to bury Alice early on, as it was said that the season of the year being hot and the corpse fat, it would have been impossible to keep her. So there was great haste to bury Alice, and it was assumed that nobody knew she was alive and there during her funeral. The funeral took place, and she was buried without any delay, being quickly interred in the ground before her corpse began to decay. At this time, undertakers and grave diggers did not have large freezers to hold bodies inside of mortuaries, and because of this, it was deemed to bury the dead quickly before their body decayed. It was said that in the Tudor period, that Henry VIII and Elizabeth I even exploded inside of their coffins because of the gases that had built up. The steps were taken by grave diggers, especially with larger corpses, to bury them quicker, and it was in the best interest of the family. Alice's family did consent to her being buried quickly, despite her husband wanting to wait, and a ready-made coffin was used for her burial. She was forced into a coffin that was too small for her, and it was said that the onlookers even used poles to force her arms and legs down inside of the coffin, so that the lid could be fastened shut. However, 2 days later, nearby, some boys were playing in the park near the graveside, and they heard a voice coming from the grave. The children heard the moans and cries coming from Alice Blunden's grave, and she was crying for help and for someone to break her out of her coffin. They told their headmaster at school, and he disciplined them for telling tales and making up lies. But the next day, the headmaster decided to take a look for himself. He came across the grave and heard Alice's cries coming from the ground, but it was the next day that she was dug up by someone who could disinter her. When the coffin was opened, Alice Blunden was found in a rather poor state. She had bruises and blood all over her, as she had been trying desperately for days to try and open her grave and escape, and she had passed out from the exhaustion of trying to defeat death. Her body was described as most lamentably beaten, and the public yet again could not find any more signs of life, and because of this, those who were present decided to lower Alice back into her grave overnight, with the coroner attending the next day to observe what was happening. But when the coroner attended the next morning, it was found that yet again she had awoken inside the coffin. She was found with fresh wounds on her body from the previous day, when her body was inspected, and had torn off part of her shirt and had scratched her arms and also punched herself in the face to escape. It was said they found she had torn off great part of her winding sheet, scratched herself first in several places, and beaten her mouth so long till it was all in glaw blood. The coroner then pronounced her as definitely dead, but the night before it was believed that those who first dug her up possibly could have saved her. However, as it rained, they abandoned the gravesite for the local pub. A court case looked into the death of Alice Blunden and was brought by her husband. It was believed that there could have been a case for murder trial. It was found that her life had been thrown away, and a number of people were sought. The doctor who pronounced her dead initially claimed there were no signs of life, and that the mirror test where her breath could not be seen had never failed. With this he claimed Alice Blunden was an unfortunate case, and because of her death, Basingstoke was punished, as it was said. The town had a considerable fine set upon them for their neglect. So Alice Blunden was the woman who was buried twice in a time where medical knowledge was not amazing. Inside of the coffin it must have been brutal, as she was slowly starved of oxygen, but she thrashed around in the ground trying to save herself. But this could not be done. If there is a lesson to Alice Blunden's story, it is don't drink too much poppy water, as bad things can happen. She's gone down in English history as the woman buried alive twice. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.